It's a pretty boring story, but it was very exciting for me. I was working for an advertising agency, and I was 24 years old. And a friend of mine, Bob Arbogast, had a local show called Arbogast Margolis on Channel 11 in Los Angeles. And we used to use Bob to do commercials. And I had an idea. I wanted to go on his show and come on as the person who was responsible for putting the stars' names in the sidewalks of Hollywood. So I did. And what we had someone in the audience at the very end. They were asking me questions, and I did it very real. And at the very end, we had someone stand up and say, well, how exactly do you get a name in the sidewalk of Hollywood? I mean, could I? And I just laid the person away. I said, are you saying that could money make a difference? I said, my life is research. My life is the industry. My life is Hollywood. I don't give a damn about money. I said, and I'm very shocked that you would ask something like this, and I may not let this segment air. And Arbogast apologized and everything else, and then said, I'm very sorry, but how would I get my name in the sidewalk of Hollywood? I said, do you have $10? Now, Tom Smothers was watching the show at the time and believed it, thought that I was the guy that did that. And he called me up the next day, and I went over there, and I met everyone, and he offered me a job as a writer-performer on the show like that. Then I went back to my agency, and I didn't hear from him for 3.5 months. So I went from not wanting it to going crazy to being infuriated. So he calls at the end of 3.5 months and says, hi, Bob, it's Tom. We go to work on Monday. I said, let me say something first of all. I said, first of all, I've been at this agency 3.5 years. You promised me a job. I don't hear from you for 3.5 months. You're calling me Friday, telling me we go to work Monday. How would you feel if I went into you as someone who had worked 3.5 years and quit and gave you 3 days? He said, okay, well, maybe, how much time do you need? I said, do you have 10 minutes? It's the same joke.
So, I mean, this is incredible.
Are you going to use that whole story, that whole boring story?
We're going to use everything.
Because it bores me when I say it.
No, that's a great story.
I'm just telling the lens right there in case they try to use that, because that was real. But it was the truth. Truth isn't funny. Go ahead. We had pitching sessions, and then we would team up, and the teams would be assigned certain segments. You would be given an opening monologue by Tom and Dick, or to participate in the finale of the show, or to write one of the first spots I ever wrote. And keep in mind, I was a 25-year-old kid. Was Kate Smith? Excuse me, Kate Smith. Take that out, okay? Let's do that again. Yeah, one of the first spots I ever wrote. And keep in mind, I was a 25-year-old kid. Kate Smith was on the show. And Tom came into our office, Steve Martin and myself, and said, your assignment is to write a Tom and Kate comedy spot. And I just packed, because I mean, there was nothing. So then I thought, and I thought, and I thought, and I came up with what I thought was very funny. And it was just a 30-second thing. It was Kate Smith as Oliver Hardy, and Tom as Stan Laurel, and he did a great Stan Laurel, and we did a little Laurel and Hardy thing. So I came to the read-through because I was so proud and excited that my first piece was going to get on the show, and it was pretty funny, and everyone was at the table, and it got to this spot, and Kate Smith said, who wrote this? And I said, I did. I stood up. She said, I'm not doing the show, and walked out. They had to get her back and bring her in because she said, you think I'm Oliver Hardy? I said, no, you were going to be Stan Laurel. I said, that was a misprint. Tom was going to put on a fat suit. I don't think you're fat at all. So I spent the whole week apologizing to Kate Smith and telling her how beautiful God Bless America was and everything she did. And then I did something else that week. I shouldn't tell all these stories, but Kate, who actually had a great voice, I shouldn't really tell this.
Tell it, and if you don't like it, we won't use it.
Okay, but what happened is I had stepped in it in the read-through. She had walked off the show, and we had to bring her back, and I had to apologize and tell her that I didn't mean. And then, later in the week, I went down to the studio looking for her, and she was on stage in a shower cap and no makeup and a bathrobe, walking around. And I asked someone next to her, have you seen Kate Smith? Honestly, because I didn't recognize her. So it was kind of a double header. But I could be forgiven, I was only 25. My favorite show was the Liberace show. That's the one we won the Emmy for. And that was a lot of fun because Liberace hadn't been played with on television before. You know, he had this image, and we really tore it up, and he was great with it. Very funny and very agreeable, and it was really a great show. It was very exciting and very unexpected, because when we went to the Emmys, we were being censored at the time, right and left. And we found out before the show, we were nominated for writing, and we found out before the show that the clip they were going to put on the Emmy was censored, that we had sent over. So we said, that might be a sign that we're not going to win. That may be a little hint that they don't care that much for us, and we shouldn't be here. So when they announced it, it was really exciting. And you know, we were, again, we were all kids, and when you win an Emmy for doing your first show, you think that's what you get every year. It was like, oh, we won it this year, we'll win it again. But thank you very much. But no, there's no answer to that. The only thing that I can really say is Tom and Dick really gave kids a chance. I mean, we wrote the show, and we were responsible for their lives, for their making it or failing, which was unbelievable. They had no ego. I remember having a situation, I'll tell you a great story. And I don't know if this ever made air, so I don't know if this piece will air, but after a while, when you work with a performer, you build up confidence, and the performer starts relying on you. Well, I had done a few things, and Steve and I had done a few things that Tom and Dick really liked, and they had a lot of confidence in us. So I came up with an idea for Tommy to do. He wanted me to come up with Officer Judy ideas every week. So I came up with an idea that I would guard him this week, and he would be a rock and roll comedian, an Elvis kind of comic. And we wrote a great comedy act for him and put him in an Elvis outfit. And in front of his little stage, we had screaming girls, and then the audience. Well, when we did it at read-through and rehearsal, people were laughing, but it was us. It was the writers and everything else. And I'm not real sure what we were laughing at, because Tommy really sold it. He really went after it, and he was moving his hips and doing the jokes, and the girls were screaming. And he came up to me after rehearsal. He said, "This isn't working." I said, "Listen to me. Trust me, okay?" He said, "But it's not working." I said, "Were people laughing?" He said, "Those were the writers and everybody." I said, No, they don't laugh. It's funny." So then we do it in front of the audience, and he is selling it with the drum after each joke, and the girls are screaming, and I'm standing next to him as Officer Judy, guarding the crowd from him, and I can see the audience, and they're looking at him, staring at him like he's a painting. So right in the middle of the act, I said, "Tom," he said, he went right, I said, "You were right, you're bombing."
What do you do at the end?
Nothing. I loved it. I loved it more than if he had made it. The first time I did Officer Judy was, we had Judy Collins on the show. And we were trying to come up with a way to have fun with one of her records. And she just, she sings beautifully, so it was kind of difficult. So we came up with an idea. I Think It's Gonna Rain Today was the song. Absolutely beautiful. And Judy Collins had been on once in the show, and in the second half of the show, Tom says, "Ladies and gentlemen, once again, here's Judy." And the music started in front of the audience. I Think It's Gonna Rain Today. Curtains open, and I'm there with my motorcycle, lip syncing I Think It's Gonna Rain Today, her voice. Finish, and we cut over to Tom and Dick, and Dick says, "What was that, Tommy?" He says, that was Officer Judy. That's how the name happened. And he said, what's going on? He said, "Well, I got stopped. I was speeding coming over here, and I got stopped." And Dick said, "And you promised this cop he could be on the show?" He said, "Well, not just once. I think it was 6. And at that point, I came in, back to the camera, blocked the whole thing, and said, "How did I do, Tom?" He said, "You were great." That was the first time it was ever on. It was just kind of a fun idea, because it was a show with a policeman. And anytime things, we were always in the news about we've gone too far, or we're stretching this, or we're pushing that, and we had our own policeman now to come on and be very straight and to make sure the show would keep at a certain level. And then I arrested Liberace on the Emmy show, which was a lot of fun. Well, what we wound up doing is we wound up putting very outrageous things in the script. And it would go to the censor, and they would cross that off, that off, that off, and then something we wanted. and then we would give them the outrageous, 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 and then keep in what we wanted. But if you look at our shows now, they're so tame. I mean, I can't remember anything that we did then that would even open your eyes now and say, wow, you know, that's unusual. The one thrust of the show is this, you know, Smothers Brothers were against the Vietnam War. That's really, you know, an attitude that they had that other shows didn't have. Laugh-In kind of touched on it at the time, but we hit it fairly hard. Some of the things we did were cute, and some was funny, and some was amateurish and awful. But there was a special attitude about the show that I loved. I mean, you know, you couldn't at our age to be able to go home and watch a show that all the young kids were watching and be a part of it was, you know, it was just unbelievable. It was great. I'm just sorry that it was canceled when it was canceled, because Tom and Dick could have gone on for a long time.